Hi everybody, welcome back to Module 5, and continuing on from our last video, now we are going to introduce the for loop, which we learned about in Module 3, to apply to our existing P5 sketch. So just a bit of a refresher, I now have my Module 3 Spinning Flowers tutorial open, and this was, and I'll link to that video right now, and basically it's where we introduce ourselves to the concept of creating your own functions in P5, as well as for loops, which look a little bit like this section here. Coming from our last speed exercise of drawing just 1 or 2 data points into your sketch, so I've extracted 2 things. I've extracted the month in row 10 for me, and so which is specifying the size of my circle times 10. And then I'm also extracting the flower name that I have in row 10, which I'm drawing as text onto the circle. And in our last video, we covered about getNum and getString. So basically what we want to do now, if we want to draw our entire data set instead of just one point of information, then we would need to apply the for loop concept into what we've just done here. So instead of just row 10, we want it to be all of our rows all at once. To do that, I am going to start by typing in my for loop. For let I equals 0, I is less than, let's just say number here, and I plus plus, and we're going to change that number, and open and close curly brackets. And so now we've opened up our for loop. The 3 statements here, first we give it an index, and the index is what keeps the loop going. In other words, the first time this code section loops, the I is 0. I'll just demonstrate it super quickly, but if I want this section of code to loop 5 times, then I would put 5 here, and then I'll just try console.log I, right? And I'll make sure that I'm not console logging anything else. So I'll save that, I'll run this, I'll open up my console, and so there you have it. So that is how, so right now what my code is doing is it goes into preload, it goes into setup. Once it reaches my for loop, it's going to loop whatever is specified in it. In this case, it's the console log, meaning please write the I value into my console. And it did that 5 times, even though it only reaches the number 4. And that's because computers count from 0. And so hopefully that's like a really quick live view of what the I value, the role of the I value in the for loop. And so that's for loops. I'm going to move on. So a few things. First, I'm going to try with this section of code, and so this was the part where I would get string from a specific row in my data set under the column flower. I just like open that up so it's easier to talk you guys through it. But yeah, so this table.getString is getting strings from this column, right? And so what would happen if I cut that and pasted it into my for loop? That, if I just save that and run it, so nothing would happen other than the text is slightly thicker now. But what you're actually seeing is that text is probably being written or being drawn 5 times over and over itself in the same position. So it's still getting the string or getting the flower name from row 10 5 times. I would need to tell it, okay, I don't want you to get it just from row 10. I want you to get it from all of my, from my entire table, right? I want you to get it from row 1 or row 0 all the way to however many rows I have. Now the good thing is we already know how many rows we have because we have it in our sketch, which is this part here, which we got to in our last video as well. Table.getRowCount. Total, so the variable total rows is already holding the value of how many rows we have in our table. Instead of saying repeat my for loop 5 times, we can say repeat my for loop the number of rows I have, and that's how many times I want it to perform the code, because this part of the code reads the data, and this part of the code like draws the data as text into my sketch, right? And so if I say do that for the total number of rows I have, then we're saying read every row I have and also draw according to everything that you read. And so here, instead of just focusing on row 10, I can actually say I, because like I said, the I value is really following the total number of rows. It's going from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 102, or however many rows I have. So, okay, let's just run that for now. I'm gonna stop talking and let's just run that for now and see what happens. Okay, cool. So, promising, but not quite there yet. This is the names of my flowers, all written in the same exact position, which is 100 by 100. It's every names, it's all the names of the flowers, right? So we need to space it out. Again, the value of I here can be used to our advantage once again. So let me console.log the number, the value of I. Okay, so it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to 101 because I have 102 rows. So imagine if we were to use this kind of steady linear progression of numbers, if we could apply it onto the Y position of our text. We might need to space it out more, but the idea is that they will be placed in different points of the canvas, but in a linear way. I will put the I value as the Y value of my text, right? Save that, and I'm going to refresh this. Let's see what happens. Okay, like I said, we might need to space it out more because that's now at Y0, Y1, Y2, Y3. So all very condensed, only up to 100 pixels. So for example, if we put in a 20 pixel margin, there we go. And so now I have basically my flower names probably in order. Yeah, so in order, yeah, in this kind of like linear positioning in the Y, on the Y axis. Obviously, it's not perfect in that like it's getting cut off at the start and end. Why is it getting cut off at the start? Because we know that like we can see from the data that it starts from here, this Alstroemeria flower, whereas here it's starting from carnation. And that's because the Alstroemeria flower is the first row, meaning row 0. The Y position of that flower currently is at 0, which means it's like up there on the axis, so we can't see it. So a quick workaround is usually I just put in a starting margin, and it would help to name that as a variable so that you can come back and alter it if you need to. But if I say let Y margin equals 20, for example, and then add it to this formula. And so I would go Y margin plus I times 20. I'm going to tie this up because I don't like how, there we go. All right. And then we refresh that. Getting cut off in the bottom still, but we'll get to how we can condense everything to fit into your canvas parameters. But hopefully so far, this is starting to give you an idea of how you can draw your many data points onto your canvas. I'm just looking at my data to see what we can play with, but let's try putting these as like maybe like circles next to the text because our end sketch wants to have circles, and so I'm going to put like circles next to each text here. And I'm going to size them based on the character count of each flower name. So let's try that. So I'm going to do the same thing. I already have this. The only difference is instead of month, I would probably want to get the character count. And by the way, while you're working all of this, be sure that you still have that total rows equals table to get row count. Make sure that you do have that total rows information stored. Because otherwise, your for loop wouldn't be able to know how many times it has to perform this. Chart character count table.getNum, and then same deal. I want it to repeat I number of times, and I'm gonna say character. I think that was the name of my column. Character count. Awesome. So the name of my header, my number of rows, not get. Oh yes, get num. And then I want a circle to be placed right on 100, because that's at 100. So maybe I'll put it at 200. And then I'll put it at, so the Y position can follow the text because I want it to be at the same like level as each name. So I'll put that in. And then the size of it will be determined by the character count. So that will be determined by these numbers in this column. And so I can just say character count times 10 just to amplify the differences between the numbers. I've saved that, and then I'll refresh this and hope it works, and realize it doesn't. Okay, what's happening here? Car count, tilo, and character. Ah, okay, wrong variable. I need to say that instead of that. That's the header name. This is the variable name. I need to be using the variable name, not the header name. So save, refresh. Great. So can barely see anything, but look at that. Okay, I'm gonna times 3 just so I can actually see stuff. Maybe let's just make it the stroke, because there's a lot of overlap there and no fill. Okay, but so now what we are seeing is each circle corresponding to the number of characters that you find on each name of the flower all the way down. And that's a very simple example of how you can start visualizing information and points in your data set into visuals, into text, and any kind of art that you want to create in P5, which we've learned about in the module so far.